Greetings from Brother Stephen. I'm a disciple and witness of Jesus Christ. To all the inhabitants of the earth, I present to you as a witness this gospel of the kingdom. In this lesson today, titled The Five Gardens in Eden, we're going to be going over Genesis chapter 2, verses 10 through 14. We're going to read these particular verses in the King James Version, Oxford edition of 1769 first, which is a false translation of the Bible. And as we're correctly translating these particular verses, we're going to explain the scriptures and the translation as we go through. So again, Genesis chapter 2 verse 10, King James Version, Oxford edition reads, "And a river ran out of Eden to water the garden, and from hence it was parted and became four heads. The name of the first is Pison, that which compassed the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. There is bdellium, and the onyx stone. And the name of the second river is Gihon. The same is that which compassed the whole land of Ethiopia. And the name of the third river is Hiddekel, that is which goes towards the east of Assyria. And the fourth river is Euphrates." Now, if this is your first time tuning in to one of my videos, I would strongly urge you to stop this video and go back and watch this video on the YouTube channel first. It is titled Eden, and we go over what Eden means when we cover Genesis chapter 2, verses 8. And we go over what Eden means, and we go over the location of Eden. And on this particular image, this highlighted green area is Eden. Eden is scientifically known as the Fertile Crescent or the cradle of civilization. You can Google both of those terms and even Google images of those terms, and it will show you exactly what Eden is. It's just called, scientifically today, it is just called by a different name. So now we get into Genesis chapter 2, verses 10 to 14. And again, we're going to go over like my translation of these particular verses. And again, just beginning at verse 10, it says, "And a river went out of Eden to water the garden." Now, when Elohim first created Adam, or Adam, he created him today, what we know as Egypt, in the Delta Nile. Those that I'll have to probably pull up another picture here later, but it's basically, if you was to follow the Niles and Egypt up to the Mediterranean Sea, where those rivers meet at the Mediterranean Sea, is where Adam and pretty much life began, when God created everything. And it says he took the man eastward of Eden and he placed him in a garden. Now this garden that is within Eden, called the Garden of Eden, it was first located somewhere around this Jordan River. We don't know how wide, how long. The scriptures don't give us that much information. We just know it was located around the Jordan. So this Garden of Eden was a pretty big garden. This was not a small garden. And we go over other verses to let you know everything back then was large. The first animals and human beings were all giant species. There was giant people, dinosaurs, and stuff like that. And this was an enormous garden also. So don't picture this, a little garden in your backyard. So now we have Genesis chapter 2, verse 10 again. "And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was separated." Now again, that King James Version, Oxford edition, used the word parted. But when a lot of people read that word parted, they think of like hair being parted that is still connected. So when they try to locate Eden, they look for four rivers that is connected by one river. But that word parted is really not a good word to use, because these waters was completely separated. They was divided. So what we're going to do first is go over why we choose the word separated here versus parted. When you go to Genesis chapter 2, verse 10, again, we use the Blue Letter Bible to study with. You just Google Blue Letter Bible, open up that website, you can do a word search on parted, then open up your concordance, and you will see that this word parted comes from the Hebrew reference number 6504. On that website, you'll be able to click on this 6504, and another page will open up, which will give you the Hebrew word that parted was translated from. And as you see, I have that here on my screen. It comes from this Hebrew word, and you'll pronounce it parade. Now, in this lesson, I want to teach you something a little new, which you also have access to on Blue Letter Bible, and that is the Gesenius Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon. Now, first, I kind of explain what the Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon is, and to do that, I'm going to open up here. This is a gentleman by the name of Wilhelm Home Gesenius, and I'm probably butchering his name. If I am, forgive me. But he is the one who's giving credit for the Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon. Now, that's his name. If you wanted to do a little bit more research about him, you can either pause it, read some of this on your free time. Just you can just Google him and look him up yourself. So go back here. So the Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon is actually are separate books, and basically what they go through, they study the etymology of biblical words, particular Semitic words that Hebrew comes from, and we do a lot of that when we're studying ourselves. His studies probably just go a little deeper than what I particularly do, so it's a good resource to use while you're studying scriptures to understand the etymology and what these words meant back then. A lot of people get meanings of stuff today confused with what it meant back then, and back then was a total different world. Things was not the same. The meaning of words was not the same. But anyway, when you look up this in the Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon, that's Hebrew word parade, and I'll scroll back up here so you can see those the same words. It tells you what it means: a break off, to break in pieces, to separate by breaking. This means a complete separation. And I believe if I have this pulled up, we'll go over this really quick too. Yeah, here's the word. This is the Blue Letter Bible that I was just talking about. And again, we're just going to scroll down to see how this particular word is used. And there's that Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon. But we're going to scroll down and see how this word is used in Scripture. As you can see, by these were the islands of the Gentiles divided, a separation, divided, separate, separated. So again, separated, severed. So again, that is why here in this particular, in my translation, instead of using the word parted, because parted can confuse people, I just used that word separated. It was a complete separation, a breaking off, separated by breaking. These rivers and other gardens were not connected. It was a separation. So again, it says, then a river ran out of Eden to water the garden, and from hence it was separated and became 4 heads. So now the next thing we're going to focus on is, what does this word heads mean in Scripture? And it's the same thing when you go back to that Blue Letter Bible app and you look up the Hebrew reference number for heads. You will find that it comes from 7 to 18, and I have that 7 to 18 pulled up for you already. And this is the Hebrew word heads is translated from. You pronounce this Hebrew word rush. Now, not only is this Hebrew word pronounced rush, but this very first letter in this Hebrew word is also called Rush. Now we're just going to do a few things here. The first thing is I want you to understand what Rush means in the ancient Hebrew. So basically we take that earliest Hebrew here, this is Rush, and we translate it back to ancient Semitic or ancient Hebrew. And these are the hieroglyphs that they come from. And so you have the head, an ox head, and two teeth. And basically kind of what this means in ancient Hebrew is the head of El, or the son of El, or you can say, you can any way you want to try to pronounce that, but this is referring to Christ, and it's devoured. So you basically have like the Son of God devoured. Just like in the beginning when Elohim created all the light and stars and the constellations and all that stuff representing him, the very first language and writing system we have, it all represents Christ in the beginning. So here even we have the word rush, and that even that word represents Christ. A majority of the words in ancient Hebrew still points to Christ. And it's important you understand that. Now again, we was talking about this word rush. And the word rush means heads. And the very first letter alone in the word rush is rush. When you translate that back to the ancient Semitic, it is a head. But what you need to understand again is why this word used head. And if you have been following my studies from the beginning, from the very first video up to this point, you should have some type of clue what head represents. We kind of go over this in the study titled Elohim Not God, when we go over the meaning of Elohim. And I'm going to try to pull that up. I have it pulled up already. So we kind of go through, this is that study when we go over Elohim. And we was teaching in that lesson that the word God does not belong in Old Testament scripture because it replaces several different names with different meanings with the word God that has one meaning. So you lose out on a lot of learning when you do that. And again, I'm just scrolling down in this lesson. So for an example, when we was teaching about who Elohim is, we kind of use this as an analogy so you can begin to start understanding how Elohim, although there are many members, those many members function as a single body. So we use a single body to represent how Elohim operates. And in that study, we talked about how El, which is Christ, is the head of that body. Also in that lesson, we talked about how the Hebrew letter Rush represents the head, and how this Hebrew letter represents a body in Hebrew. I'm going to scroll back up because I just forgot one of my Hebrew letters real quick, so I just go back to this chart to look it up. That is Hak. So, and then just scrolling down, see if we have any more images. Again, we're just going over how this letter alone represents the Hebrew letter Rush represents head. So, in other words, when we get back to this lesson, if something has a head, it has a body. And that's what most people are missing out on when they read this particular verse, because it said it became four heads. These four heads is represented by something that has a body. So again, that's just kind of what this image here represents. And again, this goes back to the beginning when you read the verses and it says Adam was created in Elohim's image. Elohim is not a single individual. Elohim is has many members that makes up one body. And as you're going to see, although he created Adam and Chava, or Adam and Eve in the beginning, that eventually they had children, offsprings, and those children all became part of Adam's body. They all operated as a single individual. They was all part of the same body. So again, um, if there's a head, it represents something that has a body. And just to go over 2 verses for you, if you go to Isaiah 1 and 5, it says, "Why should you be punished anymore? You will revolt more and more." This is talking to the children of Israel because they was disobedient. It says, "The whole head is sick, the whole heart is faint." And this head represents the head of the people. So they said if the head is sick, the whole body is sick. So not only does he have to get rid of the head, but he has to get rid of the whole body. Sometimes if the body wasn't just functioning right, you keep the head, replace members in the body. And just another verse, that's an Old Testament verse, this is a New Testament verse, 1 Corinthians 11 and 3. It says, "But I would have you know that the head of every man is Christ, and that the head of every woman is the man, and the head of Christ is God." So in other words, they use this head to represent the chief, the person who is charged, who's the guy, who's leading. And just like a man is the head of the woman and a woman have children, that man, that woman, their children represents one body, or you can say one family. And that is how the scriptures, a lot of times when the scriptures refer to head or one, it is referring not to a single individual, but it is referring to many members of one body or one family. And again, I have this image here just representing the head and a body. So when you go back up to where it says, "And it became 4 heads," these 4 heads are basically 4 captains, 4 chiefs, and they govern over a body. They are a head of many members that make up one body. And then I just have these verses again. We're going to go over real quick. When you go to 1 Corinthians 12 and 14, it says, "For the body is not one member, but many." And 1 Corinthians 12 and 12, "For as the body is one and have many members, and all those members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Christ. And so also was Adam in the beginning." So now we're back at Genesis chapter 2, verses 10 through 14. "And a river ran out of Eden," and again, this is that Jordan River, "to water the garden. And from hence it was separated and became into 4 gardens." So we don't just have one garden in Eden anymore. We have 4 gardens. And just like Adam is the head of this garden, you have 4 other men who's the head of these other 4 gardens. So again, this is just that image of the Fertile Crescent. We have Adam is the head of this garden here. It says the river was parted. It means completely separated. And it's going to give you the name of those 4 rivers and locations. But it's these rivers that we go over in that study Eden first. It's the Niles in Egypt, and these rivers over here, what we call today Tigris and Euphrates. But they are completely separated. These rivers are not connected, and these are different gardens after the first garden. So when we get to verse 11, it says the name of the first is Pison. Now Pison is what we know today as the Blue Nile. So I have an image here. I hope you can see that. This is that the Nile, and this is the Blue Nile. And then we have what is called the White Nile. So the name of the first is Pison, which is the Blue Nile. That is which compassed the whole land of Havilah. So if you take that first river, the blue now, it says compass the whole land of Havilah. Now you know, I have this here so you know where the land of Havilah is. It is within the Fertile Crescent, but it compasses the whole land of Havilah. And I will explain here in a second why I have Havilah here. Now it says where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. There is bdellium and the diamond stone. So there's a few things I'm going to go over here. The first one, it says where there is gold. We'll go over that first. If you look up, if you Google some of the biggest gold mines in Africa, you can Google mines or gold mines. As you can see here, I did a search for gold mines and mines. So the yellow represents gold mines. So as you can see here in this picture, where the land of Havilah is, where it says compass the whole land of Havilah, they are rich in gold. There's some, you have 4 major gold mines there in that land. So again, in verse 12 says, and the gold in that land is good. We just covered that. It says there is bdellium. So if you go look up bdellium, all you have to do is, do a Google search, read a couple different dictionaries if you don't trust Wikipedia. But there you have a picture of bdellium. And one of the things I want to point out is where they say here is bdellium. I just want to go right here to where it says bdellium is from. As you can see, it says bdellium grows in Ethiopia and Eritrea in sub-Saharan Africa. So now I'm just going to go back to my, so one of the reasons that you know that Havilah is in Africa, because bdellium only grows in Africa. It is a natural resource of Africa. Now, and again, it's said Ethiopia and Eritrea. And as you can see, I'll move this forward really quick so you can see there's that Eritrea right there. So you have the gold, you have the bdellium. And last thing I have, I'm going to go over here in verse 12 where it says, and the diamond stone. Now, the King James Version Bible, it says onyx stone. But there is something I want to point out really quick about the onyx stone, or these different stones in the Bible, just so you're aware for future study. Let's see where I have this. Okay, here we go. Here is that term onyx stone. Well, in my translation, I have diamond. If you click on the Hebrew reference number for onyx stone, this is the Hebrew word that onyx is translated from. You cannot you'll pronounce this shuham, but I'm going to scroll down. And as you can see here, it says a precious stone or gem. And then it says probably the onyx. I don't know how to pronounce this stone, the beryl, but they say probably. This means they not 100% sure what type of stones the Hebrews called shuham. They're just really not. They're not 100% sure. But then as we continue, I'm going to scroll down here. And I'm going to open up my concordance. I'm doing this for a reason. I'm going to point out something here. We're going to scroll down. Let's see here. I'm looking for a particular. And if I don't see it in one of these verses, I'll just do a word search myself here in a second. I'm looking for the word diamond. I don't see it. Oh, here we go. I'm sorry. Okay. So now, so give you another another example of why I have diamond. Even if you look up diamond in the concordance, it comes from Hebrew reference number 3095. So we're going to click on that 3095. So this is the Hebrew word that diamond is translated from. But again, when you scroll down, it's the same thing, a precious stone known for its hardness. But look what they have. Perhaps the jasper, onyx, or diamond. This means they're not 100% sure which stone is which. So with that being said, that was my searching for gold mines in Africa. We went over the Dillium. I believe this is probably the diamond, and again, I'm not even 100% sure. I just know Africa is known to be rich not only in gold and dillium, but diamonds. So I believe the onyx stone in this particular verse in the King James Version Bible should read diamond. You watch even all type of movies today about what they call blood diamonds in Africa. So now we're at verse 13. It says, and the name of the second river is Gihon. And again, that second river, Gihon, is today what we would call the White Nile. And it says, that same is that which compassed the whole land. I have here Cush, not Ethiopia. This is Cush. So we have the land of Havilah and we have the land of Cush. Now I'm going to show you why I changed the name of Ethiopia into Cush. When you look up Ethiopia, again using the Blue Letter Bible, you will see that it comes from the Hebrew reference number 3568. And I have that 3568 pulled up here for you. And as you can see, the Hebrew word is not Ethiopia. The Hebrew word is Cush. And again, Hebrew reference number 3568, 3568, and then look, 3568. But what's the word there? That is not Ethiopia, that is Cush. So it says the sons of Ham. So Noah had 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Now it's getting into the children of Ham. It says Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. So now when you scroll back up here at this map, it actually makes a lot of sense when you read the scriptures. Basically, you have the descendants of Ham, you have Cush, you have Mizraim, which is Egypt. We're not 100% sure where Put and his descendants was located, but then we do know Canaan was in the land of Canaan, which we know as Israel. So this map is making perfect sense. We have Cush, we have Mizraim or Egypt, and then we have the Canaanites in the land of Canaan. And even if you go to Genesis 10 and verse 7, it gets into the descendants of Cush. And there's 2 things. It doesn't say Ethiopia here. This is the sons of Cush, not Ethiopia. Is Sheba and Havilah. So again, when you're trying to figure out the location of Havilah, it's making sense now. You have Cush here, where Ethiopia, where they says Ethiopia is really Cush. Then you have his descendants Havilah here, and then you have Cush descendants. Not only Havilah, but some of Cush descendants spreading into Saudi Arabia, because they eventually migrate to Saudi Arabia and back up to the Fertile Crescent here in Babel, because Nimrod is a descendant of Cush, and Nimrod was the first to rule in Babel. So you have Cush descendants in Africa, and as they grow, they migrate to here, the land of Havilah, before Egypt. You have them in Saudi Arabia, and they migrate back up to the Fertile Crescent here in what is called Mesopotamia. And again, even Babel, because Nimrod was the first king in Babel, and that's a descendant of Cush. So this map is making perfect sense. We have the land of Cush, we have the land of Havilah, not Ethiopia. So now I have this next image here. As we read verse 14, it says, and the name of the third river is Hiddekel. This is the river we know as Tigris today. And it says, that is it which go towards the east of Assyria. And Assyria is located in this area here. I believe it's Nineveh that is in Assyria. And it says goes towards the east of Assyria. And the fourth river is Perath. The name Euphrates is not in the Old Testament. They replaced Perath with Euphrates because that is what we call the river today, Euphrates. I just wanted you to know the real name of that river, or what the Hebrews called that river. It was Perath. They did not call it Euphrates. We call it Euphrates today. Just like they did not call it the Tigris, it was called Hiddekel. See, they kept the correct translation here for Hiddekel. I don't understand why they didn't keep the correct translation also for Perath, but that's why my translation is just updated. Hiddekel is the correct Hebrew translation. It might have been pronounced Hiddekel, but we don't have that Hiddekel accent, like put a C in front of here or a K, but we typically don't talk with an accent like that, so we just say Hiddekel and Perath. But we'll keep going. So now I'm just going back over Genesis chapter 1 verses 27 through 29, because there's another point that I want to make about the in this lesson. When you read Genesis chapter 1 verses 27 through 29, I'll read through this really quick. It says, so Elohim created Adam in his duplicate. In the image of Elohim created he him, male and female created he them. He did not create female in his image. He created Adam in his image, and he cloned female from man. It says, and Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said unto them, have sex and children, and populate the earth, and govern it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that crawl upon the earth. And Elohim said, behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in which is fruit of a tree producing seeds. To you it shall be for food. Now, when you read Genesis chapter 1 verses 27 through 29, there's a few things I want to point out here. The first thing is he's being very vague. He's not giving a description of creation at all. It talks about, and I have it here, it talks about the creation of Adam. It talks about the garden. It doesn't even name the garden. And it talks about the woman. But you have to go back to Genesis chapter 2 to get more details about each of these creations. So again, Genesis chapter 1 verses 27 through 29 cover the information from Genesis chapter 2, 4 through 7, 8 through 17, and 21 to 23. Chapter 1, he just throwing a vague statement out there. Then he go over these in detail when you get to chapter 2. When he told Adam and Eve, let's go over this again. He says, have sex and have children and populate. Adam and Eve began to produce children and have sex that very same day. It's not like they waited a month, 3 months. They actually produced children and begin to populate the Fertile Crescent before you get to Genesis chapter 3, before they're deceived by the serpent. And that is why here in Genesis, when you go to Genesis chapter 1 verses 27 through 29, when he say, and Elohim said, behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, they're in the Garden of Eden at this point. So again, when you in the book of Genesis chapter 1, all we have is one garden. When you get to Genesis chapter 2 verses 10 through 14, what you're reading is Adam and Eve obeyed Elohim. They're having sex, having children, and they're populating Eden, or the Fertile Crescent. And they go from one garden to having 5 gardens. Now we're finna scroll down to this next image of what the where the 5 gardens could have been possibly located. We have the first garden in this area somewhere. This is that Jordan River where the first garden could have been located. Then we have the second. Either the second garden was talking about the length of this entire river, or it was located somewhere along the river. We're not 100% sure. It was probably located along the whole river, and then there was a head, like Adam is the head here. You would have had somebody in charge, the head here, and then you would have had the same thing with the white Nile or Gihon. You have a whole family of people, men and women, producing, farming, gardening. And then when you go back up, you would have a garden here around Euphrates, and then up here around the Tigris or Hiddekel. So basically what the verses is talking about here in this lesson is letting you know that there was 4 more gardens in Eden before the fall. And another thing you have to understand is before the fall, before Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, Adam and Eve, and even their children, these people who's populating and creating these gardens, they did not have any scientific knowledge whatsoever. They only had cognitive skills, and they did not create tools or anything during in their life until they ate from the fruit. They only worked with their hands. They had no tools. So even when it comes to water, they had to migrate and live around water because this is fresh water for gardening, it's fresh water to drink. We can't drink seawater. All water has to be filtered. So what is this? This is naturally filtered water. They wouldn't have not known anything about how to filter water themselves. They depended on Elohim for this type of knowledge until they ate from the tree of knowledge, which was scientific knowledge. So these back then, these were people who lived in a world without any man-made technology whatsoever. And again, that's why the first thing Adam and Eve do after they eat, they create clothes. Clothes is the first invention by man. They say they create aprons out of leaves. That's the first creation of man. And again, as you continue to read through the Bible, you will read about the evolution of technology ever since they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So, pretty much with that being said, this concludes this gospel.